This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
And welcome to Boomer Life on CL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton, joined today by our friends from the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. CEO Maria Howard is here, and today's conversation is a pretty frank discussion about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, what it is, what it's like to live with it, what research is being done, and we're hoping we'll be able to answer some of the many questions that you might have about Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, starting this conversation with our first guest means we're starting at the top. Jim Mann had a professional career with the airlines for more than 25 years, and Jim also had a second career as a communications consultant. Jim held positions on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Society, both in BC and nationally in Canada, I understand, and is also one of the biggest, most passionate advocates in the nation for Alzheimer's disease. That's because Jim Mann was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 10 years ago when he was 58.
58, yes.
I did the math right.
Yeah.
Jim's work means sharing his own experience of living with dementia in an effort to promote understanding and to help others overcome the stigma of the disease. It's a pleasure to have Jim on the show today, so I want to say hello and welcome. And how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, thank you. Keeping busy, which is always good.
That is good. Yeah. It's wonderful to have you joining us once again. You were on with us a couple of years ago, but today, Jim, we're talking about the state of dementia research. So now you've been living with dementia for over 10 years now, and I know that you're a very outspoken advocate who believes in ensuring that people living with the disease have a seat at the table and have a voice. But you've also been a very active participant in the research. So I understand that you focused your participation on quality of life or clinical research. Why does that branch of dementia research speak to you?
Well, you know, Joanne, I understand and appreciate all the medically focused research, but I feel that that's a long-term game, and in part because of what I understand to be gaps in the basic scientific understanding of dementia. So for me personally, I am more excited to see many researchers investigating the quality of life stream because I believe this research adds quality of life today and tomorrow for those of us living with a diagnosis of dementia.
So you first got involved with research about 5 years ago. From your bio, I read it was around 2012. Can you talk a little bit about that research and what the experience was like for you?
Sure. My first real sort of long-term introduction to research was with Dr. Elaine Wiersma at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay. And the research project was called, I have to look this up here, Developing a Self-Management Program for People Living with Dementia. There were three of us, all living with a dementia diagnosis that were active on the advisory board throughout the whole process, right from the beginning right through to the end. And we were part of being part of the whole process. I saw the rigor of research. So I really got a much better understanding of the science of research. And, you know, really at the end of the day, I found it to be a fabulous learning opportunity and a real good experience.
So what are some of the other studies that you have participated in over time?
Well, I'm on the advisory board for a research project that's led by Dr. Janice Keefe at Mount St. Vincent University in Nova Scotia. That focus is on long-term care. I'm also associated with TREC, which is an acronym for Translating Research in Elder Care, with Dr. Carol Estabrooks out of University of Alberta in Edmonton. And currently I'm working on a proposal with Dr. Deb O'Connor and Dr. Alison Finney out of UBC. The project out of Halifax is the acronym is SALTI, Seniors Adding Life to Years. So it's looking at not enhancing the experience. I think that'd be going a bit far, but looking at the experience of living in residential care, how to make it better for the people who, the residents of residential care, in different ways, and that's where I'm not sure of the specifics, but I know they're looking at some of the researchers are actually going to residential care home and talking to the residents and about not just their experiences, but taking that back and then trying to, what improvements might be made in the long term.
To make it better for them.
Yes.
Socially, personally, developmentally.
Well, in their day-to-day living and how to add life to their years in residential care. I think some residents or some residential care homes forget about the importance of a recreational program. So if the recreational director or the person who is doing the recreation in a home, if they're off, sick or whatever, sometimes they're not replaced. Well, what does that do for the residents? They're left to sort of sit there.
Fend for themselves and create their own entertainment when they may not be capable of it.
That's right. And so you end up, so why did I bother getting up this morning, really? And so it's looking at various aspects and putting the importance of, in this case, of recreation to the residents. So sort of letting, how do I say it, sort of communicating the importance to a broad audience.
I think it's very important because I think often people come to residential care because they've moved to a place in their physical abilities or even their cognitive abilities that they either need more care or they need safety. But that doesn't then assume that they don't still have interests of enjoying life and pleasure and all those things. And so that's why it's so important in a residential care home to ensure that recreation and social activities and all those elements are still completely available, because all people need to have something that makes them interested and excited and social. And so as Jim said, it shouldn't be a lower priority. It should be as high a priority as physical care and safety and issues like that.
I know that one of the streams of that research project is actually looking at policy. And I guess the example I might use is the majority of a residential care home is usually female. So what did those women do before they went into residential care? They set the table. They cut cucumbers, they did all of that stuff. They cleaned up after. But yet, in most residential care homes, that's not happening. We'll serve you, you just sit there. And in a couple of residential care homes I viewed in Alberta, they did have some residents cleaning up or setting a table or like cutting like a cucumber, whatever, for a salad. But I know that they had a lot of policy hoops to jump over because, they're vulnerable.
Yes. And should they be using a sharp knife or anything? But you know what? That's a great topic of conversation. Absolutely. And it gives them a sense of self-worth. But just to look at who that person was before they came into the residential home. That's great. We could probably talk about that for a long time.
Well, but I think
yes.
that's the exciting part about research that aligns with dementia and that's what you'll hear today, is that research is not just about biomedical scientists and labs with beakers. I mean, lots of the research that's happening, especially around dementia and Alzheimer's, which Jim is a big part of, is quality of life and care, and how do you ensure that environment is still conducive to the person having a healthy life, even though they have been diagnosed with a disease that will be terminal. But that doesn't mean that the ability for that person to still enjoy and contribute stops. And so the research on the quality side of the world around dementia is extremely important, and it's extremely important to have people like Jim and other advocates share what they know is important to them. But it is different than the classic, scientist in the white lab coat in the lab with beakers, which most people think of when you talk about research. Yeah. So it is incredibly important. So it's great for people to sort of think about that and how they contribute to that.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to know that you're so heavily involved in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jim, has your involvement with quality of life research actually changed the way that you approach your advocacy work or the issues that you focus on?
Well, I made a presentation, my first presentation in the fall of 2008, and I talked about the importance of the first person account, the voice of the individual with dementia, and I said that without that, it's all theoretical. We need the real life experiences told, so officials and other people we know do not rely solely on theory, myths, or stereotypes. So now I reinforced that and have learned over the years about the entire process. I'm a bit more patient, although I have to emphasize the word a bit, because I keep saying that people with dementia don't have time for baby steps. So we just have to try to move things forward at a faster rate.
So with all of this experience, what would you say, Jim, to someone who's living with dementia right now who actually wanted to participate in research?
I realize that for many people getting a diagnosis of dementia, it's a kick in the stomach. But research, they need to sit back and think about the research, whether it's medical or quality of life, because it is a vital part of living with dementia. And so the bottom line for me is people living with dementia can inform research. The lived experience is much different than viewing dementia as a caregiver or as a researcher. And it's that perspective that is unique, but very, very important to research projects. And at the end of the day, it's why sit on the sidelines when you can add your own voice to research.
Well, it's been great that you've added your voice to this program. Is there anything else that you think is really important that you wanted to share today?
No, I think it's just, I very much appreciate the opportunity to sort of, add my voice to the discussion about this quality of life research that is often overlooked when people talk about dementia research.
Jim Mann, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. You're a true inspiration. And thank you for all you've contributed to helping others that have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's as yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you for being here. This is Boomer Life on CL 650 and a discussion with friends from the Alzheimer's Society of BC. We've heard from CEO Maria Howard and advocate Jim Mann so far, but I know many of you ask what's being done to find a cure or a cause and what's happening in the research department. We'll have that conversation with two doctors next on Boomer Life on CL 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.